Awesome. All right. So we're going to pick up this week is on page 75. And what we covered last week was the fifth step. And so we wrapped it up with the step 5 promises, and we can see them on the middle of the page 75. And we talk about how we go into action, and that is what this chapter and this book and really this program is all about, action. And it talks about how we pocket our pride and we go to it. Now we illuminating every twisted character, every dark cranny of the past. And it says, once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel that we're on the broad highway, capital B, capital H, broad highway, walking hand in hand with the capital S, capital U, Spirit of the universe. So that's what we did. We took action. We're experiencing some of these fifth step promises. We are delighted. What a surprise. I didn't think a fifth step would leave me delighted. Delighted, right? We're jazzed and we're into action. What is this next course of action? We're going to rock and we're going to roll. We're full of enthusiasm. What are we going to do next? Quiet hour. We're going to take a quiet hour, which, by the way, I will say it's the only time we get some chill out time, other than our daily time with God. We've got a whole hour, a lot of the timelines in this program are like next, immediately, at once. We dive into action, get an hour. It's lovely. And I hope we don't have to do anything. Spoilers, we have to do some stuff in the hour. So it says returning home. So bottom paragraph, page 75. Says returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. That is a full 60 minutes. Full 60, full hour. Not like 15 is good enough. A full hour, 60 minutes. And this is just something that I found when I start working with sponsees, and this is what I do. You don't have to do this, but from the very beginning, I ask them to begin to cultivate a daily prayer and a daily meditation routine. And I will say, the ones that have begun to do that at this point do not regret meditating. I gotta be quiet for an hour. They're real grateful that they started that practice now. That's all I'm saying. That's just my experience. And so, and that's what we're going to do. So returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. It says carefully reviewing what we have done. So in this quiet hour, we're going to review the actions that we've taken. Now we're not going to review them alone. In step 5, it talks about how a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. Now in step 5, it's talking about sharing with others. But I'm not alone in that quiet hour. So it says, we thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know him better. And that's a prayer. So whenever in this book we ask that as a prayer, and I think we thank is definitely a prayer. And it's a reminder of what is the purpose of these steps. What am I doing here? Well, the whole purpose of these steps is to clear away the stuff that is in me that is blocking me from God. What I need is that conscious contact with the God of my understanding. And so this process is helping me to know God better. For those who've been coming, you would have known how we went on a Greek tangent with agnostic, and we went on a bit of a Latin tangent with conscious. So for those that are just joining us, agnostic, where we're at with step 2, ag means without, and gnosis means knowledge. What we're talking about here is a deep knowing, not an intellectual knowing. It is a heart knowing. We agnostics, it is we without knowing of God. And in step 11, when we talk about conscious contact, conscious is Latin, and con means with, and the shire or shus means knowing. And so what we're doing is we are taking these actions to clear away the stuff inside of me that is blocking me from God, so I can have a deep and profound knowing, an experiential knowing of this power, which is God. And so that's why we're going to say that prayer. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know him better. And so for those who are just joining us, I'm so glad you're here. We're on page 75 and we're on the bottom paragraph and we're rocking and rolling with the quiet hour. Woo! Yeah, it's metal, quiet hour. Wow. Anyway, so it says, taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. So we're going to go and we're going to turn very specific, page 59. That's where we're going to turn. And we're going to have a look at the steps that we have taken so far. And like I point that out, 59 and then 60 is 12. But and it says carefully reading the first 5 proposals. So we've taken 5 steps so far. We're going to review the 5 steps as they're laid out, written on page 59 or written on the wall or the Zoom screen, wherever you see them. And it says, we ask if we have omitted anything, for we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? And so these are these questions that we can ask. Now, one of the things that I want to point out, when I first came to these directions, what I did was I very simply asked myself this. So I asked myself, have I been thorough? Do I have a thorough understanding of step 1? Have I truly conceded to my innermost self that I have this illness, that I have the obsession, that I have the allergy? Have I conceded to my innermost self that on my own power, I will relapse? And I look at step 2 and am I open to the idea that there could be a power greater than myself? Am I solid in that belief that there is one? And perhaps that belief, and not perhaps, but that belief that that power is bigger than my alcoholism. Am I solid in that? Have I really made that decision? That 3rd step decision? Am I willing to go to any lengths to dive into this way of life? I can review my 4th step. Have I been fearless? Have I been thorough? Have I missed anything? Have I left anything off? And did I not share anything in that 5th step process? And I want you to know as well what my experience is there have been times I've come to that quiet hour and something came to me. And it wasn't, in my experience, it wasn't that I was trying to hold on to a secret or I was trying to not share something. What happened is I had cleared away so much of the garbage that there was other stuff that was bubbling to the surface that I genuinely forgot. And so if something comes up or we were afraid, then we didn't share that thing that's in our heart that we're scared to share. Either or, whether it comes up naturally or we were scared to share it. What do? Well, the book doesn't say sit in shame. That's never a direction in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. Never. What I can do is I can reach out to my sponsor, to the person that has received my 5th step, and I can share it with them. And that's exactly what I did, is I shared it with them. And you know what? Wasn't a big deal. And I'm free. Now, when we talk about this, so how I've done that is where I asked myself. Now, you've already heard me say time and time and time in the book, whenever it says we ask, that is a prayer. And it was recently, it was actually probably my last, not my last one, I think the one before last. But anyway, it was a recent, 5th step that I had done. And I came to the directions and I had the thought, it says we ask. And throughout the book, with my sponsees and at studies, I say, anytime it says we ask, that it's a prayer. And it just opened up for me that what if that we ask is not just me asking me, not just me running it by me, but me asking God. God, have I omitted anything? God, is there anything that I've left off? God, have I skimped into the cement put into the foundation? God, have I tried to make mortar without sand? And for those who just joined us, we're on the very bottom paragraph of page 75. And I'm so glad you're here. So welcome. And that's the thing. What we're trying to do is we're trying to build that spiritual structure, right? Upon the cornerstone of step 2, we're building that spiritual structure. Now, I am not a construction person. So if there are people who work at the trades, you can let me know. But if I'm trying to make mortar and mortar, that cement, that like adhesive for the bricks, for the, for the stones, putting them together. If I try to make mortar without sand, that sand is that thing that allows the bricks to adhere together. And so imagine trying to build something, trying to stick it together like glue without whatever makes glue sticky. I don't know. But mortar without sand, it's a mess. It's a glop. It's not going to stick and it's going to fall apart. Is there anything that I'm missing? And I kind of just want to share with you that over the years, I have done the quiet hour a whole number of different ways. And I just kind of want to share a little bit of my experiences with the quiet hour. And so I've done one of the ways in which I've done the quiet hour. It says an hour, so it's 60 minutes. And what I did was I set a timer where there was an alarm that would go off every 10 minutes. And what I would do is I would spend 10 minutes on step 1, 10 minutes on step 2, 10 minutes on 3, and so forth. And you might be like, Paige, there's 60 minutes. What about that 6th one? Yeah, I'm the worst. I absolutely grab into step 6 when I'm in my quiet hour. I do that. I'll sit with my defects and see, do I really want, I do that my quiet hour. Oh, I'm the worst. Who invited me? Steve. It's Steve who we're talking. This is Steve's fault. But that's one of the ways in which I've done a quiet hour. Another is really where I've set the alarm, set a timer. That's how I do it because I want to make sure it's an hour. And I've just sat in God's presence. And I've asked God to direct my thinking and show me what needs to be revealed for me. And that was a beautiful, incredible experience. And then I've done it where I've very much just gone through the 4th step, page by page, and inviting God in through that process as well. And the reason I share that is because we do have precise, clear, cut directions, and there is a little bit of wiggle room, and there is opportunities to have new experiences. And so throughout this book and throughout this study, if I share something with you that you're like, that's not how my sponsor told me to do it, that's great. Your sponsor is right, I'm wrong. And maybe we can have a new experience, Yeah. And so that is what I do. And then it says, top of page 76, if we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. I know I'm not following the directions when I'm diving into step 6 in my quiet hour. I'm the worst. But I just figured, while I'm there, right? Because while I'm there, I got a real good lens into those defects of character. So it says, we then look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. So willingness is of the utmost importance. And one of the things I want to point out, and also welcome if you've just joined us, we're on page 76, and I'm so glad you're here. One of the things is when we look at step 3, in the 3rd step, what happens for me is I'm given my formal pink slip, right? My P45, as it were. I am fired from the management position of my life. I manage my life. My life was unmanageable. Ergo, I ought to be fired. I managed my life into an unmanageable position. The dumpster was on fire and I did it, right? So I'm fired. And in step 2, I'm given this possibility of the new manager. And in step 3, I'm going out and I'm working for God. And so it's always important for me to realize what is in my job description and what is not. And so what is in my job description when I get my pink slip and I go off and I go and work for God, that employment contract in step 3? The first thing is house cleaning. That's it. That's my job. And I think I get something cool, right? I'm going to work for God. I'm going out working for the spirit of the universe. What am I going to do? Clean my house, my spiritual house, not a literal house. If you hear house cleaning and you're like, okay, that's the key to sobriety, doing the dishes. Your spouse might appreciate it, but that's not the key to sobriety. It's the spiritual house cleaning. And so that's what I do. And then I clean the house. I get all that mess out, right? And I do that in the 5th step. And then in step 6, I'm like, okay, do I get a promotion, right? Yeah, not really. I get relegated to the willingness department. That is my job. My job is to be willing. That is my job. That is my responsibility. And I don't want that to be my job. I want defect removal, right? I want to be the one that's removing these defects. Turns out, defect removal, if you're wondering, it's upper management. That is an upper management deal, and I have been fired. So it is absolutely none of my business. But where I am is in the willingness department. And just something that I should explain for those that are just coming today. When we look at in step 5, the exact nature of my wrongs, and when we look in 6 and 7 about my shortcomings and my defects, in my experience, they're the same thing. It's the same thing. And if you have a different lens on it, where a defect is one thing and a shortcoming is another, that's cool. I'm wrong, you're right, absolutely. But just for me, what I found is it made sense for me to share, right, my defects of character, to share this thing in my 5th step, and then become willing to have that removed in my 6th, and then to ask in my 7th for that same thing to be removed. That just seemed to make sense. Now, willingness is being indispensable. Willingness is of the utmost importance. That is what I need. And that is something that is in my power and is in my control. Now it says, are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? So again, God is doing the removing. And the things I admitted are objectionable, at least for me, that was that stuff in the 5th step, right? Those were those defects of character. Those were those shortcomings. And here's my experience. Step 6 is prime willingness department. Absolutely. Because again, I don't know about you guys, but here's my experience. I am never more willing to have my defects of character removed than right after I shared with God and another human being how they burnt my life to the ground and hurt everyone around me. And also, right before I got to go make amends for those things. So step 6 and 7, it's prime willingness department, baby. Like that's what it's there. Now, and I love this when it says, can he now take them all, everyone? Can God take them? Can God take them? Not me work on them, not me manage it. Can God take them, everyone? And I love this. It says, if we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. And that's a prayer. That's the step 6 prayer. And one of the big things that I've been seeing in the book in this past year is that the book always meets me where I'm at. See, when I come to my defects of character, now, one of the things I do for my sponsees, not everyone does this, but when I receive a 5th step, I write what I hear them say their defects of character are. And then I give them that list because I don't need it, it's theirs. And so they have this list that they can take into that quiet hour, they can take into their 6 and 7. Not everybody does this, but it gives me something to do during the 5th step because we go through, in most cases, I go through the 4th step with them. So it gives me something to do. And so that's the thing, when I look at my defects of character, am I really willing to let go of my dishonesty? All my dishonesty? All my dishonesty? Even telling people when they make me feel uncomfortable? You know what I mean? Like communicating like a healthy, normal person? Even that? Am I willing to let go of all of that? And then, am I willing to let go of my people pleasing? It's not really, it's approval seeking. Am I really willing to let go of all of that, despite the fear that you might not like me, Am I willing to let go of all of that? And if I'm not, again, it's not sit in shame, live in shame. It's where do I go? I go to God. See, that's the thing. If there is any part of the program, any part of the spiritual actions, anything that I'm struggling with, that I'm not willing to do or not willing to let go of, that I'm holding on to, I can always, always, always pray for the willingness. And there's kind of a kicker. If I'm willing to pray for the willingness, I'm already in good hands, you know. But if I'm not willing to pray for the willingness, just in my experience, we might be in some trouble. So that's the thing. What I'm here to do is to look at these defects of character, to look at these shortcomings, and to grow in my willingness to have God take them from me. That is my job, willingness department. But you see, the thing is, I want to overcome them. I want to be the one to do it. I want to win. I want to kick butt at defect removal. You know what I mean? And I always kind of make this joke. It's like, here's what I want. I want to work really hard on my procrastination later. And I'm really going to get my anger under control if you all would stop getting on my nerves. And I'm really going to let go of that like approval seeking behavior. But are you mad at me? Do you like me? You know, like I cannot overcome self with self. And of course, like everyone else, I tried. Like everyone else, I tried to overcome these defects of character. And the more that I tried to exert self upon them, the more futile it was. So I had to grow in willingness. And of course, going out and making amends, heck, that helps my willingness. But I was working with this sponsee recently, and she was asking me, like, Paige, what does this willingness look like? How do you demonstrate willingness? How do you show the willingness? How do you act in willingness? Now, there are a lot of people that love the 12 and 12 because it talks a lot about 6 and 7. And if you do, that's wonderful. And then there's books like Drop the Rock that talk all about 6 and 7. And if you love that, that's wonderful. And then there are people that love that act as if or act the asset. And if you do, that's wonderful. But for me, there was a line in this book that had everything to do with 6 and 7. And it's in Bill's story. And it says, we must turn in all things to the capital F, capital L, Father of light who presides over us all. How I have demonstrated my willingness and how I have grown in my willingness, other than simply praying and asking for the willingness, is to turn in all things to the God of my understanding. And what that looks like in a real, practical, simple way is when I show up to a place like this, I pray, God, I pray that you would work through me. I pray that I would show up and be of love and service. I pray that your will, not mine, be done. That's a prayer that we're going to see a whole lot. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. Right? That, for me, has been how I demonstrate willingness. And, you know, I'm going to share some experiences that I've had with it. Because I have, like, in so many areas of my life, what I want to do is I want to climb this ladder of success. And I want to be better, and I want to do better, and I want to be victorious, right? That's not what I found these 12 steps to be. These 12 steps for me have been consistently about giving more and more of myself to that unconditional love, which is God. See, I come here in step 1, and I think it's that one issue, right? That one issue, and I gotta, okay, I'm powerless over that, and I got it right. And then I come to step 3, and I see, well, heck, I come to step 2, and I see the bedevilments. I come to step 2, and I see these human problems I can't overcome. I come to the 3rd step, and I see selfishness, self-centeredness, that I am driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. And I cannot overcome them by myself. I cannot overcome them with self. I have to have God's help. And then I dive into that 4th step, and I have a look at these resentments. I can't overcome those either, right? I can't will them away. And then you know what happens? I go to fear. You know what I can't do with fear? Will that away either. I need God's help with that. And then I look at my sex, at my relationship conduct. I got to come up with an ideal that I need God to help me live up to. So what I found is that this process is surrendering more and more and giving more of myself to that unconditional love that is God. And we'll see, at least for me, I'll share with you where I see that unconditional love in that 7th step. But I just kind of want to share my experience with defects, because it was never that I overcame them. My experience is it fell. Like in the 5th step promise, when it talks about how our fears fall from us, my experience always been is that it has fallen from me. And it was a couple of years ago, I was coming up on the 10-year anniversary of when I got sick. And, I have a physical disability, and I carry a lot of shame around my disability. And that 10-year anniversary was hit me right in the selfishness, self-centeredness. It was poking right at that button of shame, and I could feel it rising. I could feel it coming up. So what I did was I turned to the steps, and I turned to inventory, because that's what I know to do. And I turned, through a full set of steps, and I was writing on the 4th step. And this 4th step inventory, it happened to have a lot of people, and I know this will surprise you. It would happen to have a lot of people who are not doing things the way that I think that they should be doing things, and not even not listening to me, because I didn't tell them, that they need to be living their life in a completely different way, and they're doing it wrong. Long story short, a whole lot of judgment all over that inventory. And as I was working on it, and I was going hard in this set of steps. And I was sitting out in the backyard, and I was, taking a little break from writing, and I was listening to this spiritual audiobook. And, the birds are out, the sun is shining, and there was this line in this audiobook, and it said, "You cannot say you love God if you do not love his children." And it fell. That judgment fell. I didn't do it. It happened to me. I was in a place where I was willing to let go, and God worked in my life. It fell. I've also had other experiences where in the past I had struggled with the defect of gossip. It helped with that. Going out and amending gossip. That nipped that right in the bud, right? And there's a way that we go out and make amends for that. It's not always good to be like, hey, I was talking a whole lot of stuff about you. There's a gentler way to do that. I have received an amends that way, and that's how I learned about that. So depending on how we do for time, we might get into 8 and 9 today. If we get into 8 and 9, I'll tell you that I learned a whole lot about amends from receiving ones that weren't great. And not that I'm this like spiritual, amazing one. I'm sure I've given some not great amends either. I know I have. Absolutely. All right. So it is about the giving of giving to God. And actually, oh man, sorry, I'm going to go on another tangent before we get on step 7. And it's just this experience that I had. So I am in step 11, it tells us to be quick to see where religious people are right. And I love spiritual seeking. I love seeing from different traditions and different faiths and trying different things and different meditations. I love it. It's my jam. And there's this celebration, and it's a New Year celebration. And what it is you go to a flowing body of water, and essentially you take a piece of bread. And, I'm going to use our language, but we take that piece of bread, and we basically throw it into the water. And that the bread, each piece of bread represents, like a little piece of it represents our defects of character, represents our shortcomings. And and part of my spiritual seeking, I did that. I did that more than 1 year because I had a really, really cool experience. And so I live right by a river, and I wheeled my way to the top of the bridge, and I sat over the bridge, and I had my list of defects, and I was like, oh, how convenient. See, it's always good to continue to write inventory because we're prepared for spiritual things. Oh, the name of this meeting is a New Light Big Book Study. And it's also with Big Book Compendium. So I rolled to the top of this bridge, and I took my little piece of bread, and it was a loaf, like a little bun, and I sat with my defects of character, and that's what happened. Is I had, like, at first I kind of started chucking them, like, off you go, right? And also I want to see how far I can throw those guys, right? Those suckers. And I'm visualizing. Now this is just a thing that I did, a step 11 thing that I did. I'm visualizing those suckers that I'm throwing. And actually, a fun story is I threw a piece, and the piece was my codependency, and then a fish literally ate the codependency. But then I was really worried about what was can fish eat bread? Is this a bad idea? So it might not have been removed. I did look it up. Again, not removed. It was fine. It's okay, as long as it's not a part of the regular diet. Anyway, but really, what the process of 6 and 7 is, it's a lot like me holding that piece of bread over the side of the bridge, over that water, and all I'm doing is letting go. That tiny little piece of bread, that little piece that I ripped off, doesn't weigh anything. It's not heavy. It feels heavy when I'm holding on to it because I'm holding it. All I'm doing is I'm letting it go, and I'm letting it fall. And it was just a beautiful practice to watch it fall and be taken away. And there's many spiritual seekers who talk about the spiritual quality of water, and just that idea that connectedness with power greater than myself. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful process. And so again, going back to step 6, just kind of sharing some experience. Going back to step 6, if I am willing, and man, step 6, prime willingness to partner, I move on to step 7. And it says, when ready, we say something like this. So if I am willing for God to take all of this, and I'm willing to trust God with all of this, if I'm willing to surrender all of this, to let go, to let it fall for me, I say this. And I'm going to read the prayer, and then I'm going to break down the prayer. It says, my Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character, which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. We have then completed step 7. And so one of the things that I love about this step 7 prayer, it is God that is, of course, God's doing the heavy lifting. I got to do the work, but God's doing the heavy lifting. And how the prayer starts is my Creator, my Creator. Imagine those things in our life, other than a mess of our life, but those things that we have created, those things that I have created, those are things that have been made with love. Is it perhaps my Creator? I have been created with love. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me. And that's what I'm doing. See, I'm not allocating parts. I am surrendering, giving, offering, letting go more and more, all of me. Good and bad. Good and bad. See, I'm not deciding. Yeah, it's all of me. I'm not going to give God the good parts. I'm not going to give God the bad parts. I'm giving God all of me. And there are some things that I learned about this. The first thing that I learned was about the unconditional nature of God's love. God wants all of me. God's not saying, hey, you get good to get me. I want all of you. And that stuff in the 5th step, that stuff that I didn't want to tell anyone, that stuff that carries that guilt and shame, that stuff. God wants that. And not even in spite of that. God wants all of that. And we're going to see that God is going to use all of that. And man, we're working in the economy of grace. God's going to use all of it. And nothing gets wasted. I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. And I remember I was this was a little like a couple of years ago. Again, I was saying, good times out in the backyard. I was sitting in the backyard. It was a beautiful sunny day. This just helps me remember. You guys don't need the details, but I have memory issues. But a sponsee called me, and a sponsee that was just filled with gratitude. You know, her life had turned around. Things were on fire. Her family was being reunited. She was doing this work and experiencing the gifts, and she was expressing gratitude. And that doesn't happen that often. But if you know me, you know that I'm not always the best with compliments, and they make me sweaty and uncomfortable. And I'd like, oh, no, and I, don't want to accept them. But instead, something came, and I don't think it was me. There was something that I said that just came from me. And as she's saying, thank you. And I said, everything good in me is God. Everything good in me is God. And that felt like something so deeply true. And sometimes people might say, Paige, you're being a little hard on yourself. And I'm like, no, if anything, I'm bragging. Everything good in me is God. And I want God to have all of me, take all of me, use all of me. Now it says, I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character. Now I want to point out, it doesn't have a period right there. Not every single defect of character, but every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. And that's the thing. God is going to use me. God is going to take me where I need to go. See, and in many ways, this part of the 7-step prayer is a continuation of the agreement I made in step 3, that I'm going to go out and work for God. God, take away anything that stands in the way of that. Me going out and being of love and service to you and my fellows, take that. And that's the thing. See, that stuff, that shame, that stuff I didn't want to tell anyone. I do this work, I go through these steps, man, I can share that stuff with anyone, if it would be helpful. God used it, right? And it says, grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. That's who I'm working for. That's what I'm doing. And see, God is the one that removes the defects, just for me and just in my experience. And it says, amen. And I heard this thing at a meeting one time, and I'm like, oh, that's stupid, and I hate it. So it's probably right. Isn't that kind of how it comes, right? A lot of the stuff on the spiritual journey, I'm like, that's a stupid idea. So I'll share it with you because it's probably right. And so you'll notice that after the 3rd step, there is not an amen. This is one of the only prayers that has an amen. Now, there's a couple reasons. The amen symbolizes it's done. Like I've done it. I've said it. It's done. God's working. It's not mine. I let it go. It's God. But another is this idea that in the 3rd step, from the 3rd step to the 7th step, is it possible that every single action that I take from the 3rd step to the 7th step is itself a prayer? And whether or not that's true, I think that's a beautiful way to look at it. And so that is what it is for me, that 7th step, giving of myself to God. Now we're at this place where we can dive into 8 and 9, or we can wrap it up there. So what do you guys want to do? Because I'm wrapping up a little early than I normally do. What do you feel? I'm getting absolutely no feedback. You know that thing where I'm a strong, independent Paige who can make decisions on my own. I'm not codependent. There's no feedback. I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? All right. Oh, you want to go 8 and 9. All right. It's, you know what? If you wanted us to wrap it up there, you can blame Jimmy because he participated and I didn't get a lot of participation. And by blame Jimmy, we can thank him because I'm jazzed for it. All right. So it says, all right, we took our quiet hour. We did 6 and 7. Also, I want to point out 6 and 7, 5, 6, 7, that can happen in a day. So we can see that momentum that builds, right? It does not take long. Oh, goodness. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. All right. So it says we took the quiet hour. So we had our little break, our little rest. And it says, now we need more action. It's almost as though this whole thing is titled Into Action, for something. It's a whole lot of work, action. So again, I'm doing the work, but God's in the results business. So it says, without which we find that faith without works is dead. And we see that as a theme throughout this book. And what that means is belief without action, I'm a get drunk. Belief without action, I'm a relapse. I need both. And so it says, let's look at steps 8 and 9. 8 and 9. And I want to share something with you. Because one of my favorite things to do is to support people. I just love it, like genuinely. I love cheerleading people. I love supporting people. And there was a local gal and she was chairing a meeting for the first time. And she's like, Paige, will you come? And I'm like, heck yeah, I will. I love it. And I was so excited. And she's like, can you read something on step 8 for me? And I'm like, heck yeah, I can. And I was so excited. Now I'm a big book gal. And so when somebody says, can you read something for me? My brain goes to the big book. So I went to the big book. That's what I did. And so we get to the meeting and I read the first paragraph, what we're reading right now. I read that first paragraph. And then I read the next one and I kind of say, right, thank you so much. I kind of say, the next paragraph, because, there's not too much about 8. And then this is what happened. The very next person who shared, now, it's nobody's meeting, but it was kind of his meeting. He shared and he said, there's F all, he said the actual word, there's F all about step 8 in the big book. And you got to read the 12 and 12. And if you're reading out of the big book, blah, 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 blah. And immediately the spiritual giant over here, me, I caught a resentment and I had hurt feelings. And so what I did, I just want to share with you the process. It was a late meeting, so I took it through my evening review. And I saw that perhaps I'm taking things a little personally and I'm a little sensitive and self-centered. Also, I have this tendency of perhaps hitching my value and worth wagon to being seen as perfect, to being seen as a good 12-step member, for being right? So all of that. And so I got some freedom. I saw what was mine. I saw my mistakes. And then, motivated by a little bit of resentment, I went back to the book and I saw steps 8 and 9 in a whole new way. See, it's not step 8 and then step 9. In this part of the book, what we see is 8 and 9 together. And step 8 is all about a list and all about building willingness. And step 9 is all about going out and setting right those wrongs. And when we go through, now there's a lot about 8 and 9, but we'll see directions and prayers and actions to continue to grow and to build willingness. And then we'll see directions for going out and how we actually make the amends. And when I saw it in that way, it just opened up. And I love that. I love that because if you would have told me the best learning would be a resentment, well, now I believe you, but not then, right? And there's so many times when I disagree or I think it's wrong. Man, if I just come like that set aside prayer, that lay aside prayer, can I have a new experience with it? And the more I'm in this book, the more it changes and grows. So let's look at steps 8 and 9 together. But first we'll look at 8, but we'll see them running together. And it says, we have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. So we already have that. It says we made it when we took inventory. So the primary list of people, of institutions, of organizations that I owe an amends to will come from my 4-step list. We saw in resentments, column 1, the jerk. Column 2, how they were a jerk. Column 3, how their jerkiness affected me. Column 4, oh, I'm a jerk. I was the jerk. Look at that, I was the jerk first, right? And so I'm able to put them on my 8-step list. And then obviously in our relationship conduct, our sex conduct, we listed the people we harmed by it. So we add them to the list, right? And so, when it says we made it when we took inventory, we subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. What I want to point out, at least for me, It felt pretty drastic, right? And it's a drastic self-appraisal. Like I'm looking at me and I'm trying to clear away the stuff in me. And it says, now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. So it's given direction on the list. Where does the list come from? How do we get the list? And then, so that's step 8. And now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. That is a direction about step 9. And one of the things I want to point out is I go out. I go out. I want to seek them. I want to find them, right? And of course, God will absolutely bring them in our path, but I've got to search for them. I've got to seek them. I've got to actively take action to set right those wrongs. Now, so it says we attempted, and also what I want to point out is the word amend. When it says we repaired the damage done in the past. What an amend is, it's not a sorry. It's not an apology. An amend is to change, to repair, to restore. That is what an amends is. And here's an example. When we have a piece of legislation, like so the government wants to amend a bill. Now, I'm in Canada, and they don't even do this in Canada. When they're amending a piece of legislation here in Canada, they don't sit around and say sorry to each other. That's not what happens, not even in Canada. Actually, they're mean to each other. Just like any group of people together, right? They change, they repair, they restore. And so the process of amends is simply that, to go out, to change, to set right, to repair, to restore. It's not an apology. An apology might happen during the amends process. I might say, and I'm sorry, but it is not an I am sorry. So we attempted to sweep away the debris which is accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. So we're talking about sweeping away the debris. We're cleaning up the mess that we had made. But I also want to point out the mess that we had made living on self-will, not the mess that we had made drinking ourselves to death, living on self-will. So obviously the stuff from our active alcoholism, obviously the stuff from our active addiction, but also the stuff from living in self-will. And it says, if we haven't the will to do this, just like in step 6, if I do not have the willingness, I don't go in a shame spiral, I don't hate myself, I don't think I'm the biggest loser that ever lived, what do? If I haven't the will to do this, we ask. And whenever we say we ask, what is that? That is a prayer. We ask until it comes. So if I do not have the willingness to go out and make amends, pray for the willingness. You don't have to, and goodness, the truth of the matter is, this is a part of the program that a lot of us have a lot of fear, especially if we have not done it before. And it goes on to say, remember, it was agreed at the beginning that we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. So if you remember, when we were in step 3 together and we read through how it works, and we said, do you want what we have, and are you willing to go to any length to get it? And I said, this is going to bite us in the bum. Here's where it's biting us in the bum. And it will bite us in the bum again. It's going to remind us of that again. So again, so much of these actions that we're taking is a continuation of following through of our decision in the 3rd step. And so I'm just going to share with you some of the ways that so the 8th step is all about the list, and it's all about willingness. I am in the willingness department, not in the results department. I'm not in how the amends go department. I'm not in the defect removal department. I'm not in the management position of my life, nor your life department. I am in the willingness department. And don't worry, eventually we'll get a promotion, and that promotion will be effectiveness and understanding of God's will department, but still not management. Let's understand it's not upper management, right? And so there are some ways in which I've found useful to build willingness. And one of them is to put the list into categories. So taking my 8-step list and putting it into categories. Now I'm going to see if, let me see if this will work. Share screen. Let's find out. Screen is loading. Share screen. This is an example of one of the things that we can do. I've just found it really practical to take my list and to put it in these columns of willingness. So the first column of willingness is right now. These are the ones, doesn't matter if they're alive, doesn't matter if they're dead, doesn't matter if they live across the world. If I'm willing to make them right now, I'll make them right now. Just put them in that right now column. Then there's the later column. I'll make them, but I'll make them a little bit later. Then the maybe column, maybe I'm going to make amends. And then the F, no, over my dead body, absolutely not willing. Now that, or the never column. Now that is not to say we don't make all of our amends, but we're just seeing where we are at with our willingness. And one of the things that I can do with to help build and grow willingness is to start with the amends right now, that I'm willing to make amends right now. Go start with those ones. And you know what happens? They tend to go pretty well. And I tend to build willingness and I grow in that willingness. Now, then I've got these ones in the further categories, right? Well, what can I do to help build willingness? Well, I can take those amends very specifically to prayer. I can pray around those amends to grow in the willingness. One of the things that I ask my sponsees to do, and we'll cover this not next week, but the week after, one of the things I ask my sponsees to do, and I will help them do, and I'll sit with them, is we write out the amends beforehand. So I can write out the amends that for the later and the maybe, and that helps build the willingness when I have it down pen to paper. You know, that's one way we can help build willingness and working them in that order. Now, another way to build willingness is to start with the nevers. And because here's the thought with that, is if that is the one I was absolutely never willing to do, man, if I do that, it's all downhill from there. And I've had a couple sponsees that have started their amends that way. I have 2 sponsees that started with their never list. And what I did was I got them a little patch, like a motorcycle patch that says amends badass, because that's pretty badass. So if you decide to start with your never list, the ones you're absolutely unwilling to do, you let me know. I'll get you a little patch. And that's kind of the thing. Like I'll wrap up with some of these ways in which I've helped sponsees build willingness. One is writing them out ahead of time. Another is one of the things I do with sponsees sometimes is I put them in with their consent. I want you to know I do this with their consent. Nobody is forced into anything, but I put them in what I call amenders or amends competitions, and I pit them against with their consent, pit them against each other. Who's going to be the first to 6 amends or 8 amends or 10 amends, you know? And, you know, we have prizes and stuff like that. That's not Big Book approved. And it's just one of the things that I do because I think it's fun. And another way in which I've helped build amends that I thought was fun, and again, I want you to know, with the consent of my sponsees, I did not enforce this, but we played a game called Amends Roulette, where we put their 8-step lists on a virtual spinning wheel, and whoever it landed on, that's who they made amends to. And it was a beautiful, incredible story. And I just share that because when we get to 8 and 9, sometimes we can get really serious, and there is serious stuff, and we do have heavy and hard amends. There's also a lot of fun about it all. And if you think amends roulette is stupid and you don't want an amends badass patch and you don't like the columns and you don't want to play amends roulette or crush anyone and an amender, I make little fight posters for them and everything like it's the UFC. If you're not in for any of that, that's okay. Don't do it. But it's just some fun ways that I have found to build and to grow that willingness. And so with that, why don't we leave it here? And in 2 weeks from now, we're going to pick up and get right back in to 8 and 9 and doing that. So thank you guys.